Hello, welcome to my channel, Devin Rex for Art here. So today I wanted to do a video using this technique I'd used on a live stream in March 2025. On this one I had used marks with the Posca pen, and then I put my paint down, and then I did some inky bubbles on the surface and let them dry, and then I picked it up. So my inspiration for that was mainly Drew Steinbecker and some other people. And he just used just soap bubbles. I actually colorized my soap bubbles with, in this case, I used a Bombay ink, this purple Bombay ink. And my base print, like the paint I put down, was a magenta. And I used that for the bubbles. And then I didn't have time to let the bubbles dry fully, so I ended up finishing it on a short. So I'll link both of those below. So I thought this would be a good topic to do a video on because I could cut out the drying time. I ended up going down a rabbit hole. This was the first print I did, and I'll show the process of this one. And then I did it through a stencil. And then the next one I did was this one through another stencil, and this one turned out very well. So I'm going to just show the process of those two, and then I'm going to come back and I'm going to discuss the rabbit hole I went down, my preferences, what worked, what didn't work, and show you the results I got. So I won't be showing you the full process of all of the things I'm going to be talking about, but the basics we'll have after you watch the next two prints. So I'm going to use a stencil on the gel plate first. And this stencil, since it's October, I'm going to use the Sea of Crescent stencil from PM Artist Studio. And I'm going to put my base down and then put the stencil and then just have the bubbles in the spaces and then pick it up with another color. So that is my plan. So I'm going to go ahead and make my bubble mixture first. So instead of the Bombay ink, which is a permanent light fast ink, I'm going to use this acrylic ink by Dana Rowney. And I'm just going to put in a few drops. So it was about 8 drops. So about half the bottom of that. And then I'm going to put about an equal amount of the Dawn dish soap. I think you can use any dish soap. I don't think it has to be Dawn. And then I'm going to add water, just like a little bit, about the same amount of water as I have the combined dish soap and the acrylic ink. So just a little bit. And I want to get my bubbles ready first because I'm going to be applying this while the paint is wet. Okay. So you can blow to make bubbles, you can stir to make bubbles. Some people use a bottle with the bottom cut out and then cheesecloth to blow bubbles. I don't have a plastic bottle. So I'm just going to blow some bubbles. I want them a little bit smaller. So I'm going to blow and stir. Okay, a bigger cup would have been better, but we can make more bubbles in a minute. So I'm going to use this gold. It's a high viscosity gold. It's iridescent precious gold. He did most of his experiments, I think, using fluid acrylic, but I'm hoping it'll work with the gold because the print I just showed you, I did it with the Liquitex Basics. So I'm going to roll that out. Sorry, I should have had a paper under there. Roll that out. I want it fairly thick because I want the what's under the stencil, I want it to be pretty much a solid gold. So I'm going to roll that, and then I'm going to put this on top. Doesn't really matter which way, but that on top. And I think I'm going to just roll it out one more time just to make it a little bit thinner where the spaces are. And then I'm going to apply my bubbles. So I'm going to use a spatula to get them off my straw. And then I'm going to let them dry on the surface. So I want a bunch of smaller bubbles. And it doesn't have to be everywhere, but I want quite a bit of the surface covered, so that we see a difference. I'm hoping the blue will colorize the bubbles a bit. If it doesn't, that's not a huge deal. I think I want to cover the whole surface because I want the gold under the stencil to really be more dominant. It's like icing a cake, a bubble cake. A little ASMR there for you. We'll stir to get some of those bubbles a bit smaller. So I'm hoping the paint isn't too thick, that it has to be wet though. Once it's dry, and metallics dry pretty quick, so we're living on the edge here. Whoops, I lost my straw. So I'm just gonna keep adding those bubbles, especially in the center, I think, here. Okay, so I'm gonna let that dry for a couple hours. When I did this first print on my live stream, I didn't have time to let it dry fully, so I ended up doing a short to show pulling it. So I'm just gonna let that set with the stencil on there. So it's been about an hour and a half and it has dried. You can see a little bit of the blue markings there. My plate is a bit yellow from using alcohol inks on my gel plate. I'm gonna lift up the stencil, and the paint underneath here is still a little bit wet, so I'm gonna let that dry before we do the pickup. So that's dry now. I'm gonna pick it up with just some craft paint, a aquamarine blue metallic, and I'm gonna use this black deli paper to really get those metallic elements to shine. Spread that out. Okay, we're gonna let that dry and then we'll pull it up and see how it looks. Okay, this has been drying for a while. Let's give it a pull. I'm just gonna press down the edges to see if we can get all those little crusty bits that maybe were on the edge. Okay. A little bit of wrinkling because the deli tissue is thin. I'm going to bring this up for a closer look. Show you the bubbles. So here you can see, so for example, right there, you can see the bubbles that created the pattern and the blue. The dark blue from the acrylic ink in the bubbles doesn't seem to show up so much, but you definitely get a cool bubbly pattern. Now, after doing this, I'm thinking I would like to try, so this was with the high viscosity, but I'm going to try a similar experience with the the golden open paints, but I think let's do it with the ultramarine blue. Let's switch it to this magenta India ink with that. I might use a different stencil just for fun, and we'll pull it, I don't know what we're going to pull it with, but we'll pull it on a different paper as well. So I'm going to do it with this stencil, one of my favorites called Happy Stream by Miriam Wolf designed this one. And I think instead of putting the paint underneath, I'm just going to put the paint through the openings. I've got my bubbles ready to go. We're going to use the ultramarine blue, And because it stays open longer, I'm wondering if we'll get even more pronounced bubbles. It looks a bit green because again, my plate is yellowish. Just pushing hard to get it into all those openings. So it's a nice thin, even coat. Let's put our bubbles on. These are our magenta bubbles that we made with the India ink. I should get my spatula, shouldn't I? It's hard to apply it with the straw. Ooh. And then once I let it dry and I pull the stencil off, then we'll decide what color to use for our pull color. So I blow the bubbles and then I stir them to get some smaller bubbles and some bigger ones, a mixture. Now obviously you don't need to do the stencil with this, but this is the experiment that I wanted to try to see what we would get. Okay, so that's pretty good. So I'm gonna leave that to dry for probably a couple hours. Just gonna zoom you in so you can see as the bubbles pop, they're creating a pattern in that open paint. So let's pull this print. Ooh. Let's see, I like it. It's kind of interesting. I was thinking I might add the stencil lines back, but I think after all, I like it like that. I like the doing that skip rolling with the two studio acrylics iridescent, the green yellow and the blue green. And I know we used the ultramarine blue. I'm just trying to see, can we tell that there was a magenta in the bubbles? If we look here, not really. But I do like that effect, I think. So as you just saw, this first print was done using the Sea of Crescent stencil. And I did the base with the PBO Studio Acrylic High Viscosity. And then I used inky bubbles that were made with the Dana Rowley acrylic ink, Indigo. And then we let that dry and we did the pull with this Craft Aquamarine metallic paint. So I was wondering did the indigo really make a difference? I wasn't sure. So what I decided to do next was I used the Bombay ink magenta to colorize my bubbles. And then I did this print here. I used the ultramarine blue open paint. I put the stencil down, the ultramarine blue paint on top of that, and then the bubbles. Now these gold specks, those were there from a previous paint that was left on my gel plate. And what I noticed with that is that I'm going to insert here, because the paint was on top of the stencil, the bubbles, the soapy bubbles kind of made it very sort of crusty around the openings. So I did have to take time to clean that stencil quite a bit. So I soaked it in water, Dawn dish soap, and I soaked it overnight, and then I kind of gave it a little bit of a rub to clean it off. So if you don't like cleaning your stencils, that might not be the technique for you. I didn't find that this one here I had to clean as much because the paint was mostly underneath the stencil. So it didn't glob on here as much, if that makes sense. So I was really happy with that. But then I noticed, well, I used the magenta for the bubbles, and I don't know if it was worthwhile. Like, does it really show the color from the magenta bubbles? So that led me down a rabbit trail. So one of the rabbit trails, I did an experiment. This time I made my inky bubbles using Bombay black ink, the same way I had done the first one. And I did this through a stencil like that. So this is kind of an example of how goopy, if you look here, this is Darcy Sanders Peacock Swirl Design. And this one I didn't clean. So you can see all the little bits of paint left around the openings. So that one I'm going to have to soak like I did the Happy Stream stencil, but I want to show you live what that kind of looks like. So we get that interaction on there. So here is that print from that one. So this one we put down white, put the stencil down, and then I added the soapy bubbles with the black ink, waited for it to dry, lifted it up. I lifted a bit early. Some of the black ink got on top of here. But here you can see that the color, the ink color that you use can affect your print. This one I pulled, I believe it was with this PBO, the PBO blue green iridescent. So the inky color can make a difference. It just depends on your color combination. And then this one I did not using any color in the soapy mixture. So this is just plain soap. And I didn't use a stencil on this one. I did this with ultramarine blue open paint. And what I found is it took so long for the blue to dry. The bubbles just kind of all, went together and just kind of made like a soapy, slimy mess. And it took a long time to dry. I actually had to dab off some of the paint that had accumulated in these areas. So that took a long, long time to dry. And I don't think it's as effective. So when I was doing this one, some of the ink went off the paper. And I've seen people use bubbles on paper, but usually I find it's very pastel looking. So I did an experiment using the magenta, the indigo bubbles and the magenta bubbles just directly on copy paper and using them on a small gel plate. Now this gel plate, I didn't have any paint on it first, and what I found is the bubbles just kind of all coalesced and popped, and you didn't get nice bubbles. So I think putting the paint on the gel plate first definitely gives better results. Here, this I picked up with white paint, so it's a little bit more vibrant than just the bubbles themselves just on the copy paper. So then another thought I had was if I put the paint down, so this was the teal paint, and then I put the inky bubbles with indigo blue, And there you can definitely see the indigo blue, and I picked it up with this green iridescent color. So you can see that the indigo blue inky bubbles did make a difference. That was without a stencil. I did that again with the inky black bubbles on the teal blue, on this teal blue. This time I added glycerin, and what I didn't like is it took it a long time to dry, so I had to wait quite a while to pull it. And this one I pulled with the quinacridone nickel azo gold, this one here. So it's cool, I like it, but it didn't really give me an advantage adding the glycerin over not adding the glycerin. So I think that was a waste of time. And I thought, well, what if we just put the inky bubbles not on the gel plate, but we put them on a stencil. I put the stencil on the copy paper, and then I added the different colors of inky bubbles. Would we get a cool result like we got here? And it's pastel-y, which is okay if you like that. But because the stencil isn't sucked down on the copy paper, as the paper gets wet with the bubbles, it started wrinkling, and then you don't get as clear an outline of the stencil itself. So, you know, all of these would have use depending what you want to do with them for collage papers. And then this one I thought, well, what if I put the blue ultramarine blue on the plate without a stencil. I put my bubbles on, and then I just sort of wait a bit, and then I smack it down. Well, I get bubbly texture. So you do, but it just kind of smushes everything. That was the first push, that was the second push, and then that was the third and fourth and fifth push. So you get interesting texture, but not bubbles. So to me, the most successful one was this one here through the stencil. I just think the bubbles got nice and concentrated. That was with the golden open, but I like this one even better. So this was putting the paint down, the stencil on, the inky bubbles, letting them dry, pulling off the stencil, letting that paint dry, and then picking it up. So those are my preferences. I think this one would have worked better with different paint and bubble colors. So, and just playing with your color choices would be what I would recommend. So I think this was with the golden open. It really did make a mess of my stencil though. I think I would stick with regular paint or the fluid, because the fluid dries quickly. So it's a little bit, but doesn't dry too quickly. So that's my preference. I hope you enjoyed this video. I'm away right now. Next week I have another video for you to see. I hope you enjoy it. And please like, comment, subscribe, share, all that YouTubey goodness. Bye-bye. Thanks for watching.